McCarthy.
And I'm John Hazelton.
And we're here today with Let's Talk Tech London. This is the show where we talk about everything that's happening in the tech scene, but specifically to London. So what's going in the startups world, what's going on in fintech, edtech, medtech, all the techs.
Powered by talent.io, Europe's #1 fastest growing tech platform for hiring developers.
We're here today recording in Rise's podcast room. For anyone that doesn't know, Rise is the fintech accelerator powered by Barclays based in the heart of Shoreditch. Today we're joined by Jack Macfarlane, CEO of Deepstream Technologies.
Jack started off in M&A investment banking in London during the lows of financial crisis in 2008.
Despite this, he had an extremely fast rise, and by 27 he was the director of UBS, running equity derivatives and financing solutions across the whole of Latin America.
He comes from a very international background, born in Africa, grew up in Egypt, Tanzania, Peru, India, and also France. And he spent a lot of time in Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Myanmar.
Alongside this, he was also a partner of a VC firm, predominantly backing early-stage ventures.
He's also dedicated a lot of time to philanthropy through the Glencoe Foundation, doing the Walk for Life and the Smile for Life.
Welcome to the show, Jack. How did you get involved in Deepstream?
My background is in investment banking, and as a number of investment bankers, you talk about quitting all the time and wanting to leave, but the money is too good and your risk-averse kind of nature kicks in. So you actually delay the process of leaving for quite a while. That being said, I was always kind of wanted to do something on the side, and I actually invested in Deepstream personally when it started in the first angel round, and doing that kind of gave me an in.
To think about whether it was going to be the right move, or what was that your even thought process to make that move from?
Perversely, I think, and this ties into a lot of the people who are going from, corporate-y type jobs with high amounts of security into the startup world, is it's to some extent you need an excuse to get out there, right? You really need to cut ties with the safe environment you're in and get out there and try and do something. So it was almost... it's kind of an excuse. It was saying, okay, fine, I've been saying I wanted to do something myself. What is my other option? My other option is to plow, all the cash I've made into a venture myself, and start everything up from scratch. This is a great opportunity, which is a really good company that I believe in, I've invested in, and they're willing to give me a role which is effectively running the entire company. Yeah. And so it was too hard to turn down, I think.
Yeah. So you can really make sure that your investment is doing the right thing if you've got that.
Yeah, making sure they don't lose my money. No, but
that's one way.
It actually plays really well with investors as well, because initially being an investor in the company, obviously I'm doing this because I believe in the company, rather than definitely not a paycheck game.
Of course. And in terms of the business itself, can you explain to us what Deepstream does? Because it's not your typical B2C company that every startup founder wants to make big into the next Facebook. It's really in the B2B space, in a space that you don't hear about on mainstream media.
Yeah, it's definitely in the theme of the unsexy but very big industry that hasn't been disrupted yet. So Deepstream, it's been called, some people call it, we want to be the Amazon of oil and gas procurement, or Amazon of energy infrastructure
that sounds
procurement.
A little bit sexy though.
That is pretty sexy. We try and make it sound as sexy as possible. But effectively, the thesis is pretty simple. It's tendering for goods and services in energy infrastructure is incredibly archaically done, and it's all done bilaterally between businesses. And there's no platform whereby you can actually find suppliers for goods and services in that market. So what we're trying to do to start off with, and what we've done, is just brought all of these businesses onto one platform. So all of the suppliers of goods and services are there, all of the buyers of goods and services are there. And the USP in terms of the platform is it allows for you to tender for goods, which is pretty particular to the industrial oil and gas market, and find counterparties who will do certain goods and services, tender out and receive bids and then award work. So it's not I'd say when you compare it to eBay or the traditional, what you think of e-commerce, they're very product driven. So you go on a website or a platform and you see a pump or a shoe or a chair, and you say, I want to buy 20 of those chairs, and you buy them. This is more counterparty driven because the goods aren't commoditized. So you have to find, Bob Pumps, who does a specific type of pump that's made to order, and you find 5 other companies to do that, and then you send a tender out and you get bids back.
Sure. I mean, from someone who's not in the industry, it sounds like your platform makes a lot of sense and is easy. But from our conversations before, you mentioned that it's never been done this way. They're using pen and paper and fax machines still. How do you convince people who are so used to using kind of old school methods to make the move to more technology-driven approach?
Our biggest challenge is dealing with entrenched ways of working in the industry. Obviously, we've got a duty to convince them to change their modus operandi. I think we're also helped by the low oil price and low energy prices right now. That's really forcing change in terms of the companies we speak to. In fact, it's more the management we speak to who are incredibly excited about what we're doing, because they can see the bigger picture and they can see how much cost can be decreased using a platform such as ours. Often you get it's the 50-year-old procurement manager who can see the door of his retirement and has done something in the same way for the past 30 years. That's the guy who's tough to convince. Yeah. That being said, we're lucky because there's a generational shift to these companies. There's new blood. The 35 to 45-year-old people there know they might have Facebook accounts. They use social media. They're tech savvy, so they're much more open to using platforms such as Deepstream.
What would you say like the biggest threat to the business being successful would be? Do you have anything in mind, like if there's any kind of like economic or political things that could come out, or anything that could potentially be a threat to you being successful?
I think the threat when you look at oil and gas in particular, there's a threat that there's a lot of big boys there. So the majors, the super majors, the national oil companies there, they like to dictate terms and run things through their own systems. So if they really, really try and prevent this happening and having a more open approach to procurement and trading goods and services, because they want to basically have the most power and own the platform, that could be potentially a deal breaker. Because it will just mean that you can't get critical mass through the platform, because all of the big boys are just going to be using their own systems. That being said, in terms of we talk to Shell, we talk to BP, we talk to all of the big boys, and they're quite open and receptive. And I think there's a bit of a change in mindset in terms of they want to get on board with this new technology. They're keen to change the way they work. Politically, I mean, I get often asked about questions such as Brexit, like what impact is that going to have on our business? I mean, it's marginal as far as I'm concerned from our business perspective. It increases the cost of trade slightly. Ultimately, what Deepstream is that it's a trade play. So we like trade, we like globalization, we like people buying things from different countries. So increased friction around that. Yes, it will decrease that slightly. Might also have opportunities, because then you can start integrating kind of taxes automatically calculated in the system that is a value add, so they use you. So it's unclear what effects something such as Brexit would have.
And what's the bigger vision for the company? Will you always stay in oil and gas, or will you use the platform once you've captured that market as such to look at other opportunities?
So it's definitely the long play is definitely energy infrastructure and industrial. So anything that it requires tendering for goods and services. Sure. So anything that is counterparty driven, that you reach out to counterparties to ask for something and they get back to you with a response, rather than going to counterparties saying, I can see that product, I want that product. So that applies, first we're starting off with oil and gas, but it applies to the renewable sector. That's something we're looking at right now. It applies to other kind of areas of energy infrastructure, also applies to metals and mining. So it can be a real B2B marketplace which allows you to tender for goods and services. And there's some other really, really interesting things we're integrating. I mean, right now it's just getting the flow established in the system and getting people trading through it. But there's some really cool things that we're looking at around, for example, counterparty compliance is a massive thing in the industry because it's such a risk-averse industry, and the costs associated with things going wrong is so high that counterparty compliance is really, really important. So we're looking at, we're actually talking to a blockchain firm and looking at kind of a distributed ledger system where...
Funny enough, that was going to be my next question, hearing things about compliance and trade. Is blockchain going to be involved somewhere along the spectrum?
It's quite tough not to have a conversation in tech such as this without someone asking about blockchain.
It's very true.
No, blockchain's an interesting one, and I'm not going to try and say that we are kind of a blockchain company or properly using blockchain at the moment. We've got a research team who are looking at some of the elements of distributed ledger and blockchain to be integrated into our platform. So there's two areas we're looking at. One is counterparty compliance. So there's effectively a huge cost associated with vetting suppliers in the industry. And that is of tremendous value to each buyer who engages with that supplier. Now, the problem the industry has is that buyers do this independently. So Joe Pumps will get vetted by BP, they'll get vetted by Shell, they'll get vetted by Hurricane Energy, they'll get vetted by 20 other buyers separately, right? So that's 20 times the work that needs to be done is done. That only needs to be done once, and that cost can be shouldered by those 20 companies equally, right? So you can actually decrease the costs associated with vetting suppliers massively if you find a clever way in which you can have that cost shouldered by the community or the private network of buyers. So that's one area we're looking at blockchain, distributed ledger, having an automated system where suppliers upload their verification docs, that gets bid out to auditors who audit it. That cost is immediately passed on to a private network of buyers without anyone making any decisions. The second area we're looking at, and I think this is more the traditional area where blockchain is used in the supply chain, is having a ledger where every transaction across the supply chain is pinged into a central ledger. And so banks, for example, get visibility of the entire supply chain rather than just one transaction between buyer and supplier. And if you do that properly, then it has lots of positive effects on invoice financing, lending to suppliers, because Pedro Pumps might be selling to Pablo pumps, and no one's going to finance Pedro Pumps, but they might finance Pedro Pumps if they know that BP is buying off Pablo Pumps. So if you can map effectively the entire supply chain, it effectively enhances the credit of each participant on that supply chain, that gives them easier access to capital, and theoretically should increase trade by reducing the frictions.
Interesting. So watch this space. Is that going to happen this year, or are we talking...
It is already happening in terms of we're already constructing the system so that it is entirely mapped out, and it is all recorded on one central ledger, right? Yeah. That is not proper blockchain. That's not proper distributed ledger technology right now, but it is all centralizing that information flow into one place.
Sure.
We're looking at bidding on a contract in the North Sea with the UK government, and we're going to be looking at introducing blockchain technology, which could be really, really interesting.
Yeah, it sounds exciting. So lots happening this year. And talk to me a little bit about your team at the moment. So it sounds like a very big kind of project, big business that you're going after. How many people have you got behind you at the moment, and what's that going to look like over the next 12 months?
I mean, it is a David and Goliath situation in terms of we are a lean tech startup and we're trying to knock the big boys off their perch. The team right now is 12 people.
Okay, so very, very lean team.
Yeah, it's really lean. We do use quite a few contractors. We use advisors. We use some consultants. It's grown pretty quickly. I mean, when I joined, it was 6 people.
Sure.
So it's just over doubled in size since then. But yeah, if everyone pulls their weight and you have the right people, it's you don't need that many people to come up with clever solutions and implement them.
Yeah, no, it sounds exciting. And just taking a slightly different tack, background in investment banking, finance heavy, moving into oil and gas, completely different industry, but I'm sure there's been a lot of similarities. How have you found your background in banking help you become startup CEO?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it's an interesting play because they are quite different industries. I'd say, and this is what convinced me to be able to do it, is when I looked at myself in terms of what I was good at, was I good in banking because I was, some kind of financial genius that was really mathsy? And no, that was not my game. I understood concepts, I understood all these technical aspects of the business, but that's not really what made me successful in that area. You look at yourself and what makes you successful. What made me successful was just being able to get things done, dealing with different people, dealing with very, very technical people, dealing with on the sales side, on the client side, and making sure that people around you are hardworking, that they produce things, that they work well in a team, all these, I guess, qualitative aspects of business. And really that's product agnostic, right? You could put that skill set in any different area, in any industry, and it should work. I guess that's what convinced me to be able to go into a completely different sector, because when you actually look at what I do on a day-to-day basis, am I looking at engineering new drill types for wells? No, right? And I'd be the wrong person to do that. I'm just trying to get a team working together properly, collaboratively, and executing on our vision. And I think you can apply that to different industries, that you don't necessarily need to be an expert in the industry matter.
Would you say was the thing that you didn't expect to be doing as a CEO in a startup? Was
loads of admin.
Oh, I hate admin. That's the worst one.
I second that. Third that.
Confidential admin is the worst because it's really boring and you can't give it to anyone else to do. No, it's really. I think the one thing that I'd say in terms of that I didn't fully appreciate is that you do realise that corporates or big organisations are set up for you to do your job. And I say that in terms of everything is there for you to... Your job becomes much more pure. You're not a lawyer because you have lawyers there to help you. You're not an accountant because you have an accounting team there to help you. You're not a quant because you have a quant guy there who is the quant, who does the quant stuff. And so your niche becomes much more pure, so you can be much, much more productive. You end up doing much narrower in scope in terms of your duties, but you end up, as a consequence, being able to be much, much, much more productive because you're only ascribing yourself to a narrow set of things. Whereas in a startup, it just blows that all open. You're having to do everything. So at times you feel a lot less productive because you're doing so many different things. You're not really completing projects in the way that you're used to. You're just having to almost make sure that everything is in check and everyone else is doing their job. So I underestimated that in terms of, I thought that would maybe be 20% of my job, and the other 80% of my job would be, let's work on the strategy and the vision, or let's work on this kind of idea I have, or let's go and close this trade with this client. That I thought that would be 80%. Maybe it's flipping that 60-40 or 70-30.
Yeah. And has that changed over time? Are you still very much doing kind of a bit of everything?
It's decreased, definitely. I think one of the keys to decreasing that is making sure that the team around you is the right team, and also trusting them to get on with their stuff and not micromanaging them and giving everyone a free rein. Because as soon as you get into the habit of, okay, I need to check everything, I need to be there and make sure that everything is done to my standard, it's a world of pain you end up in. It's much better to allow people to do it themselves, let them fail, let them learn, let them do it correctly the second time.
Well, I think it's good, like our CEO and founders are always about just empower the people. You hired them for a reason because you think they can do a job. Let them go and do it. Obviously support them, help them, but then if they need anything, they can come to you and ask. I think that's the best approach.
It's definitely. I hate this hierarchical model of the top person has to make all the decisions or be deferred to, or somehow their view is always correct and the other person's. I think that's complete rubbish. In fact, I thought that when in banking, I always used to say to my boss and my kind of mentor Kiko, this Italian guy, and I always used to go into rooms with him, and he used to ask me questions, and I used to say, well, Kiko, do you want me to lie to you and tell you what you want to hear? Or do you want me to tell you what I actually think?
It's a good question.
And because I did see in investment banking, which can be very flat structure, but it also can be very hierarchical depending on where you are. But you often see people just getting asked questions and they just answer what they think that the person who asked them the question wants to hear, which defeats the entire object of employing someone.
So what was his answer when you actually asked that question?
I mean, he laughed. I mean, it was also a way for me to have carte blanche on saying whatever I wanted to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, if he says, no, I want you to tell the truth, and then you say something he doesn't like, then you can say, well, it's not my fault you can't handle the truth.
Have you got any advice you'd give to someone who is like, there must be other people who are in your situation, in a good job, being successful, but, not necessarily quite content, looking for something else.
Yeah.
What advice would you give them about taking the plunge? Would you suggest they do it, or what kind of thought process would you make sure that they go through before they make the decision?
I would just, if you've got that bee in your bonnet, that itch, you just need to do it, and I would say do it sooner rather than later. And I probably did it slightly too late in hindsight. I think that you just really need to go for it. You're only going to know if you're going to be successful or do it properly if you give it a good try. I think a lot of people I talk to, they want to have their cake and eat it, and it's what I tried to do for a while in terms of they kept working and they're like, oh, I'm going to do something on the side. I can do something a bit not entrepreneurial, but I'm going to keep my job. It doesn't really stack up. It doesn't work. From what I've seen. So you really just need to go for it. A lot of people tell you it's the wrong decision. A lot of people tell you you're crazy for giving up a great job and a great salary and a great career for something that's uncertain. But those are the first people that are going to be praising you when you make it. And so, yeah, my advice would just be to do it. And if everything goes wrong, people are going to respect your decision for doing it, and you're going to be a better position to go back into the job you had before than if you just stayed there like a lemon, carrying on, doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah. One interesting thing on that, I was actually found, because I was based in New York when I quit actually UBS, and in the States, they are much, much, much more positive around this kind of decision. UK, they are more negative. So in the States, people from the entire spectrum of society, you talk like your friends, your family friends, the parents of your friends, everyone was just like, super supportive. Definitely do it. This is a really cool opportunity. You should, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. It's really fun. What's the worst thing that can happen? Give it a crack. That's great. You'll land on your feet, this kind of attitude. In the UK, people were a bit more, okay, that's an interesting choice, or, a bit more reserved in their approach.
Yeah. So move to the States first, build up a good network, get the support, and then do it.
Yeah, I think that we're all to some extent products of our environment. So I guess not to put too much weight on some advice you get given. If I'd put all the weight on the advice I'd given by, I guess, from people I spoke to in the UK mostly, maybe that would have decreased the likelihood of me making the decision I did. And then you go and talk to a different set of people, and then you get extremely excited and you get really happy about the decision you made. And the only difference is who you've spoken to, right? Yeah, there's no intrinsic difference in the two. So yeah, my advice would just do it.
Doesn't it? Reinforce when you speak to someone and you're talking about it in a certain way, people might reinforce what you're thinking and feeling about it. And then you talk to someone who's negative, you might bring up those and reinforce that viewpoint, I suppose. But at the end of the day, you have that gut feeling. If it seems right, sometimes you just got to go with that, right?
Yeah, and also the idea that failure is great. It's like there's and I think that's one of the reasons you get this difference in opinion. Some people are very scared of failure, and they think that if something doesn't succeed or it doesn't go to plan, then that's a real kind of black mark on you. Whereas other people see it as a huge experience you've had. It's like, you know why it failed. You know what you do different next time. You gave it a try. So I think that's... But yeah, my advice is just do it. See what happens. You'll learn a huge amount. You'll meet loads of interesting people.
I think that's the best thing about this space, the amount of interesting people you meet. like just random conversations, and you get introduced to someone and different backgrounds. And
it's also huge, yeah, exactly. And
it's really cool.
It's character building, right? Whether you like it or not, in a corporate background, you hide behind this veneer of your company. Like, who are you? You know, it's so easy. You go to dinner parties or have dinner conversations, and literally with just like, oh, I'm in investment banking at UBS. You don't have to say anything else. It's just kind of you're just hidden behind that, and people. It has this respectability. It has this kind of some degree of kudos. I mean, some people hate it, and people like that. Now, what do you say when you're at a dinner party? You know, you say, "Yeah, well, I work in tech. I run this tech startup." I mean, it's still really good and better, right? But you're not hiding behind it, right? So it's character building in that it knocks you right back down to the bottom, and you need to kind of make your own way through society and dealing with people.
Yeah, interesting. Just going back to your point, the different experiences you found by being in the US and being in the UK, do you think it's that mindset that actually drives the difference, not only in the entrepreneurial behaviours of both countries, but also the investment side of things? Because in the States, you generally get much bigger sums of that initial early stage investment compared to the UK. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's something I've struggled with. Exactly what you say is why, you know, international VC firms, for example, will deploy much riskier and larger chunks of capital in the US versus Europe. I don't know, in Europe there seems to be this culture of really keeping capital quite tightly held. So you have a lot more families who own businesses. You have a lot more incumbent big corporations that don't like to give their capital structure away to investors or to employees. And in the US, there's much more of a culture of seeing it more as an investment. So opening up the capital structure, having investors come in and take big slugs of equity with the hope that it's going to go up 10, 20 times and be a bit more aggressive. And also and be okay with it failing, you know, which increases the appetite for risk.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's definitely I found from my experiences, just from kind of talking to people, a big difference between the US, New York especially, and London. And like in New York, you know, the cleaner thinks he can be a millionaire, right? Everyone is so vested in this capitalist. Whereas in the UK, it's much more, I don't know if it's a class system, but like, even kind of wealthy, you know, middle class people, they're all about stability, a stable job, income. You know, they're not punting on the stock market, right? They're not investing much in stocks and shares. They're not embedded into the entire kind of into capitalism to the extent they are in the US.
Yeah. And on that note, Deepstream, based in London, born in London, just around the corner from here in Shoreditch. How have you found the general support, whether it's from government, kind of other initiatives that you're involved in, getting off the ground and scaling?
I mean, the support's been great, but it's been pretty much self-generated. So the support that I've had, I'm kind of involved in this other VC company. So I've got some contacts through that. I've got lots of contacts through banking. Some of our founders have a lot of contacts. So we have this big support network. We have a really, really good set of investors, and that's helped massively. I'm not sure. And from the government, I mean, I haven't seen anything. Not that I expect the government to help out. But the community is great. And Shoreditch is a really, really good place to have a startup. Where we work, which has been really, really good to us. There's lots of cool companies around us. In fact, the blockchain ideas, which we're engaging with right now, we're actually discussing that with a company called A Joint, which is right next to us in WeWork. So we literally pop next door, they're our next door neighbours, and have a chat around all the things I don't understand properly around blockchain.
Networking opportunities there.
Yeah, great networking opportunities. I think there's still a lot of work to be done. I think there's not really I don't feel there's a proper tech startup community in terms of, you know, like the legal guys will all have their like legal friends that will talk to from different firms. And banking, it was quite a close-knit, you know, whether you're at Goldman or JP or UBS or Morgan Stanley, you knew all the guys who were doing a similar thing, and you'd be aware of them and you'd talk to them and you'd share information. I don't feel that there's that same degree of cohesiveness within the tech community in London. Maybe that's because it's a newer industry, but no, we've got a pretty good network.
Nice. Cool.
And just to wrap up, one final question: where do you see Deepstream in the next 5 to 10 years? What's the vision for the business?
Well, it's we're scaling globally ex-US, and we're doing that in the next year. And really, we want to make it easy to procure goods and services in the industrial market. It is unbelievably hard, and that's leading to huge costs in the industry. So making it as easy as possible, taking away the ego away from transactions where everyone has to hold information just for themselves. It's never going to be as easy as eBay because it's not commoditized goods, but getting close to that point would be great, not just for buyers, reducing costs, but also for suppliers, because it will just blow open the market, increase competition, allow suppliers to win more business, and increase trade.
Lovely.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much again for your time today, Jack. And yes, wrapping up here.
Thanks to everyone for listening to our first podcast.
And thanks again to Jack for joining us. It's been a pleasure having him.